There are two common statements that I hear. The first one is, Kyle, I can't be saved. I'll hear things like, when I was younger, I partied hard. I left people scattered, face down in the wreckage of my decisions. Or things like, I've done some pretty horrifying things in war. Now, that first argument is a morality argument. You're saying I'm not moral enough to be saved. Then I would simply say you should read Genesis, because it literally reads like a Jerry Springer show. It hit me last week when Dan was teaching our kids about Jacob, who had a wife, and then another one, and then a concubine, and then another one. The Bible is gritty. It is messy. No one comes out clean, but many come out saved. You are not beyond the reach of grace. Now, the second argument was the atrocities of war argument. I would just ask you to consider David, who dodged his own draft, stole a man's wife, and had her military husband killed so he could have her. Now, maybe you have an ace of spades to throw on that, but I doubt it. And if you have, we haven't met yet. There's salvation for you. So the common thing I hear is, Kyle, I can't be saved. The second most common thing I hear is, Kyle, I don't need friends. And I know what some of you men are thinking right now. Here we go. Kyle is talking about the necessity of human friendships again, and that's about as appealing to me as a proctology exam. Well, maybe you're saying, you know what, friendships are lame to me. It's like a psychological crutch, and I'm too strong to need friendships. I'm not interested in just sitting around a fire singing Kumbaya. Well, when I hear that, I actually think you're deploying a smokescreen to hide your insecurity. You don't like being vulnerable because you don't like how it makes you feel. And you're afraid if you actually let people in that they will either yawn or walk away. Look, we all know you're a wreck. The cross tells us that. But in Christ, there's something more. You've been accepted by the only one who matters. So don't hold your cards so close to your chest. Now, men as a whole struggle to have real friendships. That's why 65% of the people in our small groups at Faith Family Church are ladies. Now, if you're still not convinced, why don't you answer this question? Who are your dad's good friends? I'm not talking about people he worked with. Who are your dad's good friends? If you can name even one, you're in the rare minority, because most men quit pursuing friendships after marriage. Rarely will you see a man who's 35 or older that has a friend. But this isn't just a struggle with men. Women have a tendency to avoid pursuing friendships as well. Men typically ask the why question, like, why do I need them? Women typically ask the how question, how can I find them? I'm going to answer both of those today. But what I'd like for you to do is, you have a blue card somewhere by you. If you wouldn't mind pulling that blue card out, and then there's a pen, we're going to have a little activity, okay? I'd love for you guys to participate, for everybody to participate. You say, Kyle, what does it mean for everybody to participate? Well, if you have a body, that's you, everybody. If you're a disembodied spirit in here, don't even sweat this activity, all right? I'm going to ask you to number 1 through 5. 1 through 5. There should be some pens there. If that pen doesn't work, that's our gift to you. Feel free to take that home. We've got some other ones as well. I'm going to ask you to number 1 through 5, your top 5 friends. Top 5 friends. And I'm just going to spend some time awkwardly standing up here looking at you while you do that. All right, top 5 friends. 10 seconds left. Five seconds left. 3, 2, 1. All right. Those are your top 5 friends. Now, let me give you a roadmap for today. I want to give you talking points. Now, I typically don't do that, but this week when I was studying, I was feeling a little spicy, so I thought I would. Let me give you the 4 talking points. Here's the first one. Why you are in desperate need of Christ-centered friendships. Why you are in desperate need of Christ-centered friendships. The second one is some challenges in forging Christ-centered friendships. The third one is how to be a Christ-centered friend. So we've got why and why. Then how to be a Christ-centered friend. Fourthly, why you need Jesus more than any friend. Okay, so let's just tackle the first one, why you're in desperate need of Christ-centered friends. Now, I'm actually going to push back on the notion that you do not desire friendship, because I actually believe you have a soul craving for friendships. God built that crave into you. So I want to give you my thesis, then I want to prove it, okay? Here's my thesis. You are made for Christian friendship. You are made for Christ-centered friendship. That's my thesis. Now, let me prove it. In the beginning of time, one member of the Trinity that we were singing about said to another member of the Trinity, "Let us make God in our image." Now, one of the implications of being made in the Imago Dei, Imago Dei is Latin for the image of God. One of the implications of being made in the Imago Dei is that we are meant for friendships. It's built into us. And the doctrine of the Trinity might be hard to understand, but it is the foundation for understanding how you are wired. From all eternity, one God has existed as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, bound in friendship love. There's friendship in the Godhead. Friendship was never created. There wasn't a day in which God said, "Let there be friendship." It's part of the eternal nature of God. Now, one of the theological weirdnesses of the Bible can be found in the Garden of Eden. When God said, "It is not good for man to be alone." Now think about that. That is an odd statement. Why would God look at something that he has just made that no one's messed up yet and declare it not good? It was not good for Adam to be alone before sin entered into the world. Why was it not good for him to be alone? Didn't Adam have dogs in the garden? I imagine he did. Little golden retrievers bouncing around, Australian cattle dogs biting your heels. You say, "Kyle, didn't he have cats?" No. They came after sin. They were a result of the curse. Now, people say that dogs are a man's best friend. And it's true that a man may direct love, respect, and trust toward a dog, and in return receive that from a dog. But when all is said and done, you have a thirst for friendship that is deeper and richer than that which a dog can provide. Think about what I just unpacked for you in the Garden of Eden. God made us in such a way that we couldn't even enjoy paradise without friends. Human friends. You see, Adam wasn't lonely because he was imperfect. He was lonely because he was perfect. The ache for friends is not a result of sin. Tim Keller, I call him New York City's Yoda, he said this: "To need and to want deep spiritual friendships is not a sign of spiritual immaturity, but of maturity. It's not a sign of weakness, but a sign of health. If you are lonely, you aren't dysfunctional. You're fine. You're lonely because you're not a star. You're lonely because you're not a leaf. You're lonely because God built that into you." Plato's teacher, Socrates, said, "I have a passion for friends. I would rather have a good friend than the best horse or dog. I should greatly prefer a real friend to all the gold of Darius, or even to Darius himself. I am such a lover of friends as that." Friendship is woven into the fabric of Imago Dei. That's why I'm never surprised when television shows like Friends or How I Met Your Mother or that 70s show skyrocket in the ratings. Or the best show where it has a group of friends doing life together of all time, Saved by the Bell. Loved it. I just wanted to be in there. I always thought I was Zach. People treated me like I was Screech, but that was me. Look, television can be like a needle to a hungry vein, giving the viewer a brief and intense taste of something that he longs for. In the 80s, that show was Cheers. Remember a bunch of guys bellying up to a bar? But see what that captures, the longing of our hearts for a community of friends. Do you remember the theme song and the lyrics? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. I thought about playing it, but I thought that'd be inappropriate. Friendships are the oxygen of the soul. Our thirst for friendship is written in our culture. Our thirst for friendship is also written in our hearts. I was reading Paul David Tripp this week, and he said that on 9/11, the intense heat of the fire in the World Trade Center made it impossible for those trapped by the flames to descend, but also impossible to stay where they were. And people responded with the only alternative, jumping to their deaths, and many holding hands as they leaped. Some of you are in the military because you saw that. Let me ask you a question. What's the point of holding hands? They knew they were going to die, whether they were holding hands or not. But life is more than logic. As humans, we reflect the complexity of God. And part of the divine beauty is that we are made for community. So when we leap to our deaths, we hold hands with a friend. Remember Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? He asked the Father, if it be your will you remove this cup from me? He knows that their divine friendship will be broken at the cross. And I think just for a moment, Jesus is holding hands with his Father. You see, you have that craving built into you, and then you also have that craving built into the Bible. Because friendships are very, very important in the Bible. Just consider Jesus. When Jesus came to earth, he didn't start a seminary. He did not start a network of churches. What did he do? He sat at a table and ate with friends. And it's interesting. When you look at the last thing that Jesus talked about with his disciples before he died, you know what it was? I want to leave you with this one last thing. Friendship. In his last prayer for his followers in John chapter 17, Jesus said, Father, let these disciples be one as we are one. In other words, one of the primary goals Jesus had in his death was to create a community of friends that in some way would resemble the Trinity itself. Consider the commandments. I think friendship is at the heart of the second great, no, I know friendship is at the heart of the second great commandment. Remember that? Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if you have your Hebrew Bibles open, and I know you all brought your Hebrew Bibles today. If you have your Hebrew Bibles open, you'll find out that the word neighbor and the word friend are the same Hebrew word. 142 times in the Bible is translated neighbor, 42 times in the Bible is translated friend. And we only know how to translate it based on the context. Friendship is the second great commandment. Love your friends as yourself. And then even if we go through the book that we are preaching through every other Sunday, which is the book of Proverbs. Now, some people view Proverbs like the small change of the Bible. It's not the great chapters. It's not like Romans 8, the $1 million checks. Proverbs is just the chump change, and who really needs it? Well, I would beg to differ. I think here we find God's revelation of friendship. And as I was studying this week, I just thought, how kind of God to tell us how friendship works. Now, here's what I'm going to do because it's different for us. I'm going to exegete 5 verses in Proverbs, and they're not right after one another, so I know you're like, oh, is that the unpardonable sin? I think we can do it. This is one Sunday, okay? We are typically, everyone who I've ever heard preach through Proverbs, they do the first 9 chapters, verse by verse, and then they thematically cover the rest. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to thematically cover the verses on friendships. I'm going to exegete 5 verses on friendship, okay? So because God built friendship into you, because God built friendship into your Bible, I think we should emphasize it in church. It's just interesting to me that we don't talk more about friendship in church. And depending on how you define friendship, there could be more about friendship in the Bible than there is about parenting or marriage. If I asked you how many of you have ever read a book on parenting or marriage, hands would go up everywhere. If I asked you how many of you have ever read a book on friendship, crickets, no hands. When you're in a church hunt, you typically look for 2 things: quality teaching, quality friendship. So why are we emphasizing friendship in our church? A couple of reasons. The first reason is because friendship forms you. The first verse we're going to exegete is Proverbs 13:20. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. Don't let friendship just happen by circumstance. Make them happen by choice. Careful, thoughtful choice, because you will never get away from an unwise choice of friends. It will hurt you. It will haunt you. Just think about peer pressure. There was a show back in the day called Would You Fall for That? They had different social experiments. One particular one was where 7 people would enter an elevator. They would all face the back of the elevator. Typically, when someone gets in the elevator, they would face the front of the elevator. So 7 people were in on this experiment, and there was one unsuspecting poor guy who was not. So he's standing in the elevator, looking at the doors like a normal human being, and then there's 7 people looking at him. Then they go up a floor. 2 of them get off, 2 more people get on, and they face the back as well. And so it's showing this process, how he just cannot handle being with the crowd. And so, like after a minute, he does this, then he does this, then eventually he flips all the way around. Every time the unsuspecting person eventually joins the crowd and faces the back of the elevator. It's called the Ash paradigm. You've read about that in school, how we're influenced by the crowd and we seek social conformity. Well, this elevator experiment shows us how easily we're influenced by strangers. Can you imagine how much we're influenced by friends? Your beliefs, your behaviors will be influenced by your friends. Now, I know people who have chosen friends wisely, and their friends have raised the bar for them in areas of following Christ and personal holiness. And I know people who have made poor choices of friends, and it has affected their entire life negatively. C.S. Lewis said this: the next best thing to being wise oneself is to live in a circle of those who are. Let me give you one more illustration. Years ago, there was a group of scientists, and they were trying to decide why fish swim in schools. You've seen this in the ocean, right? You'll have fish swimming like this. Suddenly one darts to the right, and then they all dart to the right. Well, they wanted to figure out why that took place. So they actually isolated the part of the brain that made the fish swim in schools. And then they took that part of the brain, they performed a partial lobotomy, and they took that part of the brain out of the fish and then put him back in water. And sure enough, the fish could still swim, but he swam all by himself and not in a school. Now, do you know what happened? The rest of the fish followed that fish, a brainless fish leading the pack, also known as middle school or life. Look, I've had soldiers tell me, soldiers who could break me in half. And that's saying something, because as you can see, I'm pretty much a man of steel. Who could break me in half, look at me in the eye and say, like, Kyle, I'm just going to shoot straight with you. When they dart right, I'm just not man enough not to dart right with them. And I always say, are you going to be a thermometer or a thermostat? Are you going to be a thermometer, which simply just measures the heat? If they do it, I'm doing it. Or are you going to be a thermostat? Are you going to change the temperature? See, friendships form you. Friendships also dictate where you will end up. But the companions of the fools will suffer harm. According to this verse, there's one factor determining how your life turns out. And that's who you walk with. Proverbs 13:20 means, you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Rochelle says it like this: your friends are your future. He says you are the average of your 5 top friends. So let's pull out that piece of paper again. You've got your 5 friends on there. It's very likely you're an average of those friends. Even in other things like finances. You probably don't make the most, probably don't make the least, you're probably right in the middle. Your emotional maturity, probably not the most, probably not the least, probably somewhere in the middle. Your fervor for Christ, probably not the most, probably not the least, probably somewhere in the middle. Let me just put it straight to you like this. If you were stoned last night, probably 3 or 4 of your friends were stoned as well. If you were chasing hard after God last night, it's very likely that 3 or 4 of your friends were chasing hard after God as well. Groeschel says it like this: we all have something we'd like to become. Maybe a better parent, a better worker, or a more solid Christian. Well, what if that decision to become that really rested on your choice of friends? You are one friend away from being a better person, a better parent, a better spouse, and you're one friend away from becoming a worse one. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Now, we also desperately need friends for spiritual growth. Proverbs 27:17 says, iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. So Christianity isn't me and Jesus. It's we and Jesus. Let yourself need people. Don't allow yourself to live isolated. Now, some of you isolate yourselves because you've been hurt. You opened up one time and you got hurt. You're like, I'm never going to do that again. Others, you don't twist your lives together with other people. That way you don't have to worry about your life being pulled apart when those people leave. But there's a danger. What do predatory animals do when they want to attack? They drive one from the pack. There are 58 one another commands in the Bible. Love one another, care for one another, pray for one another. There are 58 one another commands in the Bible that you can't do unless you have close friends. Think about this. Jesus died on a cross to create a community of friends who would do these one another things with each other. You have a desperate need for Christ-centered friendships. Secondly, let me give you some challenges to forging Christ-centered friendships. Some challenges. I think one of the challenges is life transitions. We're about to get very practical here. Major transitions in life will always affect your friendship. Maybe you change a job, maybe you PCS, maybe you have kids. Things will happen where you can't maintain the friendship that you once had. Your lives will just overlap less with your previous friends. My wife was just saying yesterday, some friendships die, and that's okay. When you go through major transitions, you need to be prepared to make new friends. Don't say things like, well, I don't want to get to know new people all over again. I don't want to re-explain my whole self to these new people. There are many challenges. Introverts are another challenge. For instance, I'm an introvert. I'm a high-functioning introvert. We've had 2 services today. As soon as we leave, I'm going to smile, I'm going to talk to you. As soon as we leave, I'm going home. I'm locking myself in a room. I'm locking the 15 kids we have outside. And I'm just going to be by myself. And I'm going to recoup. I need that time alone to recoup. And then we're having some friends over for dinner after. And having you guys over for dinner after. So then when they come, I'll come out of my room and I'll be so refreshed. I'll be refreshed. How many of you are introverts like that? Would you raise your hand? Okay, you're an introvert. Let me talk to you for a moment, some of the danger. Some of you think, it would be great if I could just forever be alone. No, that's solitary confinement. That's prison. You don't want that. Do not buy into the lie that your personality type excludes you from forging friendships, because it doesn't. And then there are extroverts. My wife is a raging extrovert. She never meets a stranger. She loves to talk wherever she goes. Being around people gives her energy. So how many of you are extroverts? Would you raise your hand? Exactly. You can just tell by the raise of the hands, because introverts are like this. Extroverts are like right here, party over here. Extrovert. Okay, don't buy into the lie, extrovert, that friendships are easy for you. Because you have lots of conversations, you think, oh, I have lots of friends. But the tendency is for all of those conversations to be a mile wide and an inch deep. Proverbs 18:24 says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. The word companions there can also be translated acquaintances. So it's possible to have many acquaintances, but no friends. Friendship is something that must be cultivated. And I love this verse because it actually tells us that friends can be better than a brother. which is shocking to me because I love my brother. We're very close. So how can a friend be closer than a brother? Well, notice the word sticks. The Hebrew word sticks is used again, actually in the 2nd chapter of the Bible, when it talks about a man cleaving to his wife. So this kind of friendship, this gospel-centered, Christ-centered kind of friendship is a covenant in a way that's very similar to marriage. And that's interesting here that Solomon is bringing this out, saying that friendship can be more valuable than family, especially when you consider his culture. It was very family-oriented. Family was everything to them. And Solomon is saying friendship will bring you things that family cannot. Friendship will bring you things that marriage cannot. Now, one of the difficulties in us forming friendships is hidden agendas. You having a hidden agenda in the friendship. So you have to ask yourself, do I appreciate my friends for who they are, not for what they give me? There's one defining characteristic of a phony friend all throughout Proverbs. You know what it is? He uses people. Proverbs 19:4 says, wealth brings many new friends, but a poor man is deserted by his friend. Have you ever been friend with a rich man? If you have, tell him we're in a building project right now, okay? And then we need to go back to one service quickly. But if you've ever been friends with a rich man, here's what you find. They struggle with friendships. You know why? They're always asking, do you love me or my money? And 9 times out of 10, it's always the money. And none of us are immune from the dangers of friendship fakery. Even our most self-sacrificial relationships tend to be rooted in what we find admirable in another person. True friendship is hard. Light friendship is easy. Oh, I love you. You make me laugh. That's easy. And that's also not real love. You don't love them. You love how that person makes you feel about yourself. You don't love them. You love yourself. Kent Hughes, I think one of the strongest Reformed commentators of our day, said that the deepest of friendships have this in common: to make the other person royalty. They work for and rejoice in others' achievements. You always have to take it back there. Is this my type of friendship? Now, another danger is culture. Culture keeps us from having Christ-centered friendships. We are consumed by family life. We pour everything into our kids, and then we pour it into whatever's left into our spouse, which is biblically totally jacked up. But then if there's anything left over, we'll just sling it to the friends. We are deceived into thinking that because of Instagram and Facebook, we imagine that we have hundreds of spectacular relationships when actually we have lots of well-wishers and acquaintances and few flesh and blood friends. Even with media, we are entranced by this one-way relationship, expending, I've seen it and I've done it, expending emotional energy as we bond with our favorite sitcom actor, sports athlete, or voice contestant. I've already picked my winner. I know who's it's going to be. I think one of the lies of my generation, the millennial generation, is that they want community. But they can never find it. They can never find the perfect one. That's why they're consistently moving churches and jumping from place to place. I always say the same thing. You don't want community. You want the idea of community. Not the actual event, the idea. And maybe you're here and you're like, Kyle, look, I don't need friends because I'm married and my wife is my best friend. Well, that's romantic. You're going to get some points. That's good. It's wrong, but it's good. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you should be friends with your spouse. However, a third-party friendship can even help your marriage. For instance, there's been numerous times where someone has spoken into my life and showed me something that was off, that was not Christ-like. Most of the time, it's one of our other elders, Kent Workman. And he'll call me out on something, and then I'll come home and I'll tell Sarah, I'm like, did you, this was going on. And she's like, yeah, been trying to tell you that for 6 months. Yeah, it helps. Exterior friendships can help. All right, let me give you the third one here. How to be a Christ-centered friend. All right, this is the how-to. How to be a Christ-centered friend. I've heard many people say, I need better friends, but very few people say, I need to be a better friend. Be the friend you want to have. You want someone to call you? Call someone else. You want someone to bring over a meal when you're sick? Bring over a meal to someone else when they're sick. Destroy the wish dream of the perfect friend. Go into friendships expecting perfection from Jesus only. That's the basis of a Christ-centered friendship. As wonderful as human friendships are, they are never perfect in a fallen world. Your friend will disappoint you. They will be insensitive to your needs. And here's the strange but true thing I've found to be true. God's people will often forgive people that are non-Christians of something that they would never forgive another Christian if they committed that act against them. And that's dangerous because God warns us that an unforgiving spirit puts you into prison. And some of you have been in prison for 15 years, holding on to bitterness. Bitterness is a substance that eats its container. It's not doing them any good. It's eating you. It's destroying you. Don't hold grudges. Don't keep an open file in your brain like, these are the ways my friend has wronged me. Don't do that. Connect over shared weaknesses. True friendship is born by connecting over shared weaknesses. J.D. Greear says it like this: you can impress people with your strengths, but you can only connect with people through your weaknesses. C.S. Lewis said it like this: friendship is born at that moment when one person says to another, wait, you too? I thought I was the only one. Are you letting people in? You cannot be deeply encouraged until you are deeply known. So find some vehicles for forging these Christ-centered friendships. We have some at the church, some are small groups. That's why I'm always saying don't stay in rows, get in circles as well. Don't leave the rows, but rows and circles, all right? Ministries, join the greeting team here. Join the nursery team here. When ladies, we only let ladies work in the nursery. When ladies work in the nursery together, it's like soldiers bonding in a bunker because you are in battle, friends. This many people, 0 to 2 back there right now. It's poor workers. Mission trips. We're about to go to Honduras, work with John MacArthur's group over there. M&Ms, moms and munchkins. We do that once a month, a time for moms to connect. Have people over for meals. And how did Jesus do evangelism? Around the table. Around the table. Tables all throughout the scripture. I had a pastor friend say to me recently, he said, look, my church is growing, and there's a lot of new people coming in, and I've got other people in the church coming to me, and they're asking, saying things, they're probably not asking, they're probably just complaining, saying things like, man, there's so many new people here. I don't know who they are, and I don't know what to do. And he said, what would you tell them? And I said, I know exactly what we tell them. Hit the road, Jack. Then I started singing, and don't you come back no more, no more. And he's like, do you have anything a little bit more politically correct? And I said, sure, here's what I would tell him. You will never forget anyone that sits around your table. I've never forgotten one person that I've had around my table. We're always going to be a church that's growing and having new people come in and out. Every 2 years we have a brand new church. The best way is to have people around your table. Now, Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times, a brother is born for adversity. Here's the mark of a Christ-centered friend. Be present. Christ-centered friends show up. When? At all times. The phrase there is actually at the beginning of the sentence instead of at the end of the sentence to place an emphasis there. It's showing the force at all times. It actually can be translated in all seasons. When is a friend there? In all your seasons of life. Almost anything bad can be wonderful with friends. And almost anything good can be terrible without them. Half the battle in making Christian friendships, just showing up. Now, here's another big part. Proverbs 27:16. Be willing to wound and be wounded. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Now, this is deliberately paradoxical. Wounds, sweet. Kisses, painful. What does this mean? Biblical friendship invites critique. Now, this isn't nitpicking. Some of you have people in your life, and they're just nitpicking. They're picking every little thing that messes up with you, and they're telling you some crazy stuff. Well, the Spurge spoke to that. He said, have a deaf ear and a blind eye. You're going to have some crazy people. How many of you have ever known crazy people? Would you raise your hand? Let's just raise it high. We're loud and proud. How many of you have crazy people in your family? Loud and proud. All right? You're going to have some crazy people tell you some stuff. But you need to have a group of people that when they tell you something and you think it's crazy, you submit to it. What does wounding mean? So we could just, substitute the word wounding. Faithful are the drop kicks of a friend. Is that what it means? Like, I need to drop kick my friend? No. Wounding means rebuking. Rebuking, considerately and prayerfully administered, cements friendships. It does not loosen them. Now, kisses feel better than wounds. But if you only have friends who kiss you all the time, you're going to find out that you will eventually destroy yourself. If your friends have never told you something that ticks you off, they're not your real friends. Judas Iscariot is a perfect example of someone who can kiss you while destroying you. And you must give hunting license out to your friends, at least 3 of them. Say, look, I want you to hunt blind spots in my life. If there's anything that's not in step with the gospel, I want you to call it out. And some of you guys are thinking like, Kyle, I don't see any blind spots. That's why they're blind spots. You don't see them. But there are other people looking at you, and they're like, how can they be missing that? Give people permission to speak into your life. People see you better than you see yourself. Be wounded and be willing to wound. Now, some of you find it harder to give wounds than to receive wounds. Introverts. Others find it harder to receive wounds than give. Extroverts. But sometimes I'll hear people say, yeah, I know that my friend is making some bad decisions and it's going to destroy their lives. But, it's none of my business. Wrong. Friends make it their business. You're proving that you love a conflict-free zone more than you love that person. And we have to be ruthless in making sure that our friendships are Christ-centered. Centered only around Christ. Because there's many different types of friendships. There's hobby-centered friendships. Centered around sports, hunting, golfing, farming, reading, homeschooling, eating organic. Then there's affinity-centered friendships. They have kids, I have kids. They're in their 30s, I'm in my 30s. They're in the military, I'm in the military. They're single, I'm single. But then there's Christ-centered friendships. Because you have a glue that is stronger than hobbies and affinities. It's a gospel glue. Cicero said it like this. The essence of friendship is not to look at each other, but to look at something in common. The essence of friendship is not, do you love me? It's what do we love together? That's why people who do not look alike, who do not sound alike, who have different interests, can actually be deep friends in Jesus Christ. I think you need friends that are 15 years older than you and 15 years younger than you. Generational discipleship. Now, that is not easy for our church because the average age is 26. So that is not easy. And so, most churches try to get younger. We try to get older. I tell you, invite your grandma, okay? Invite your granddaddy. Invite them all. We just had the Wilhelms come back. Wilhelms, would you raise your hand? There are snowbirds, and they just came back. Yeah. It's their first Sunday back, and so we're so glad to have them back. Look, we need friends that do not look like us. Now, let me give you an example. I brought a couple of pictures to show you. You're probably like, what do these guys have in common? Okay, the one on the left is R.C. Sproul. The one on the right is one of our deacons. No, I'm just kidding. The one on the right is Alice Cooper. So you've got a pastor and a metalhead, and they're both pointing at you. Look, R.C. Sproul was a strong theologian. We've actually had people in our church converted under his ministry. Alice Cooper was a strong partier who later repented of his sins and trusted Jesus Christ as a Savior. The first time they met was on a golf course. They played a round of golf together. Any of you ever played golf? Raise your hand. Okay, good. I was going to leave this out, but I'm just going to go ahead and tell you anyway. Alice Cooper was putting like this, and he left a putt 2 feet short, and R.C. Sproul says he told him, "Nice putt, Alice." Do you get it? Nobody plays golf here. The first service, it was like crickets. So when somebody leaves a putt short, you always make fun of them like they hit it like a girl. "Nice putt, Alice." And I shouldn't have said it. Why did you raise your hand if you wasn't going to laugh? Help me. All right. If you're a farmer, you need friends that have no idea what color a John Deere is. If you're city-centered, you need friends who love to watch NASCAR. In Jesus Christ, techies and jocks can be friends. Hip-hoppers with doctors, artists and UFC fighters, businessmen with hipsters, Cowboy fans and Redskins fans. In Jesus, preppies and yuppies are friends. Valley girls with homegirls. How can they all be friends? They bow before King Jesus. That is the friendship-forming nature of the gospel. It brings diverse people together. Now, let me just give you one little tidbit of advice. If you want to be a true friend, don't hang around them all the time. There's a verse in Proverbs, I love it, Proverbs 25:17. "Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you." Now, how many of you have ever met this friend? "Look, honey, he's over again, uninvited." We call this friendship etiquette. Some people just don't have it. I saw a Minions meme this week that said, "Never let your friends feel lonely. Disturb them all the time." Well, Proverbs 25:17 says, "Don't be a minion. Go home." Even Jesus had times away from his friends. I've known people who have spent too much time with each other that eventually their friendship was destroyed. If you're going to grow, you're going to need space. So give one another a little space. And don't be a drama king or a drama queen. There are VIPs and VDPs. VIPs are very inspirational people. That's what we want to be. VDPs are very draining people. Like when you ask them, "Hey, how was your day?" Suddenly you hear, You know what they're doing? They're backing up the dump truck. They're about to unload on you everything that's ever went wrong in their entire life, that you're about to hear it. Don't be that type of friend. And don't be a toxic friend who seeks to isolate one friend from another. Don't say things like, "Well, we don't need them." Don't monopolize people's time. All right, I want to give you something. It's hard, okay? So I'm just going to tell you. Maybe that'll help you receive it. Maybe that just helps you turn it off, okay? But I want to give you something hard. Realize that Christ-centered friendships demand hard decisions. They demand hard decisions. This week I read about the friendship of Jonathan and David in 1 Samuel 18. Now picture these military guys, just ripped. That's how I picture them. Probably tatted up, Hebrew right there. That's how I picture them. So picture that, and this is what it says. The soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. Now picture strong men saying that. They are not wearing skinny jeans. There are no skinny jeans in the Old Testament. The soul of Jonathan was knit. If you're wearing skinny jeans, I'm sorry. I'm sure I've already offended you before now. So, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved David as his own soul. So Jonathan's father was Saul, and he hated David, even though he was the best soldier in the army. He hated him because every time David would come back from a victory, he'd hear this annoying song, "David has killed his 10,000, Saul has killed his thousands." And Saul said, "I hate that song, and I hate that man." And he tried to kill David on a couple of occasions by throwing ninja darts at him. And then David made like Jackie Chan and dodged them both. Finally, Jonathan went to his dad and was like, "Daddy, you got to promise not to kill my good friend David." So Saul agreed. But he didn't keep his word. Eventually, he tried to kill him again. In fact, there's an incident where David was in the bed. They pulled the sheets back, but David had a little mannequin in there. Psyched him out. 1 Samuel 18 is a pretty amazing story. Eventually, Jonathan saw the ruthlessness of his father, and he believed his friend David. He had a choice: family, friend. Jonathan had to choose sides, and he chose David because Christ-centered friendships are deeper than blood. R.C. Sproul pointed out that we praise Jonathan for being loyal to David, but we neglect the fact that he had to be disloyal to his own father in order to be loyal to David. You have to make hard decisions to be loyal friends. Let me give you an example. Sarah and I, we go to the Y in Hoptown. And so on Fridays, it's my day off. Didn't take the last Friday off, but it's my day off. On Fridays, we will typically go to the Y, and then we'll sit around with some of the senior citizens there, and we'll just talk, because they come to talk. They don't come to work out. They come to talk. And I don't want to exaggerate this one woman's age, but I think it was 130. So we're sitting there talking, 130 years old, and then she starts. I could tell she was just a bitter woman. Right, there's a little gossip circle there. I could tell she's a bitter woman. And here's what she said. She was talking about something that happened 30 years ago. She said, and you know when that Kent Workman came to Second Baptist? Well, Kent Workman's one of our elders at our church. He's preaching at another church today. I wouldn't be telling you this. He's preaching at another church. She said, what about Kent Workman, you know? And look, he wasn't even seminary trained. And I looked at Sarah and I said, we're going to leave. I'm not dealing with this bitterness that's been in this woman for 30 years. We're going to leave. But right before I left, there was a man there, a pastor actually. And I can just hear him now. He said, no. Stop. You stop that right now. Seminary doesn't prepare a man. God prepares a man. Seminary doesn't call a man. God calls a man. And then we left. And I started thinking later, that man was a friend to Kent. And I was not. I punked out because I didn't want to create an awkward situation. That man didn't even know Kent, and they didn't look alike. Kent's Anglo, this pastor was African American. And he was a better friend than not even knowing Kent than I was to Kent, and he's one of my elders. I determined from that day forward, I'm just not going to allow that to happen in my presence anymore. Now, let me give you a silly illustration of that. I made a man mad in church one time. This shocks you, I know. This is like, no, you made people mad. I made a man mad in church, and here's why he got mad at me. Because I said, you're born a child of hell, and you must be converted to become a child of God. And he was mad. And he says, my whole life I've been told I was born a child of God. Don't you tell me I was born a child of Satan. And I'm like, dude, open the Bible. Just read a little bit. And he was mad, and here's what he did. He went around town saying this. He's probably still doing it this morning. He went around town saying this. He said, look, I don't know how Kyle and Sarah have two vehicles that are paid off. Well, number one, I've had the same vehicles since I was 16 years old. That's how. I don't know how Kyle and Sarah have two vehicles that are paid off, and they come and buy a brand new house. You know, I don't know where they get the money. I don't know if it's drugs or what. You decide. I'm like, drugs. So I'm preaching the gospel by day, and I'm slinging by night. Like he literally thought I was Tupac. And, you know, at first I kind of took it as a compliment because I thought he called me Tupac because of my rapping skills. You drop the beat and I'll make it speak. But it turns out that wasn't it, right? But I'd have friends come to me and they would tell me, like, hey, so-and-so is going around town saying you're selling drugs again. And I would just laugh about it. But eventually I had to say, like, look, you know I'm not slinging. He's like, yeah, I know you're not slinging. Well, you're just not being a good friend by listening to that. Even though no one's believing it. You can't listen to that and be a loyal friend at the same time. So I would say that to you as well. Live by that rule. There will be no gossip in your presence. Ever. Now, here's one of the purposes of a Christ-centered friend. To keep one another believing. So believing what? Believing in Jesus Christ. That is one of the purposes of a Christ-centered friend, to keep one another believing in Jesus Christ. There's a community there. Let me illustrate it with this. In the 80s, I was born in the 80s, 86, November 11th, in case you want to give us a birthday present. In the 80s, a lady in John Piper's church came to him. She was living in fornication. Her conscience was just bothering her. And she came to them. After a while, John drew the adultery out. And then he said this to her. You know, don't you, that if you continue in this sin, you're going to hell. You know, don't you, that if you don't turn and fight this, you're going to hell. Now, that was in 1985. She wrote him in 1992, and this is what she said, and I quote, "I wonder whether you remember a very much younger me sitting in your office and telling you that I was afraid God would have to use some car accident or some other awful event to get my attention. You pointed out that the consequences of my deliberate choice to continue sinning would be nothing short of hell itself. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. Being a missionary kid and saved at age 6. It was a turning point in my life, and I wanted to write and thank you. That warning made me feel loved. It meant something to me that you cared enough to tell me." She ended it by saying, "Your compassion came through to me." You will have to look at some friends in the face or have friends look at you in the face. And they're going to tell you Jesus is better. I know you're dabbling in this and you're just excuse after excuse after excuse. I'm telling you, Jesus is better. Jesus is better. Jesus is better. That's a cheap imitation. It's not going to give you peace, contentment. The fulfillment you're looking for is not in those arms. It's in the arms of Christ. Cheap imitation. Jesus is better. Jesus is better. Jesus is better. And you're going to have to look at some people and say, if you don't turn and fight this, you're going to go to hell. Because it's going to prove that you were never one of his. You're going to have to say that to your roommate. You're going to have to say that to your child. You're going to have to say that to your family. Let me end with this. Let's jump to number 4. Number 4, why you need Jesus more than any friends. I love John chapter 15, that entire passage. Because when Jesus said, "Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends," suddenly the whole world could be understood through the lens of friendship. And never before that moment could the world be understood through the lens of friendship. And this passage is all about friendship. Jesus uses the word friend 3 times. It's clearly his subject. So whenever Jesus uses the word love in the passage, he's talking about a friendship love. And Keller says it like this: friendship love, Jesus' friendship love, always lets you in, but never lets you down. Always lets you in, but never lets you down. Let me unpack that. When Jesus said, "No longer do I call you servants, but I have called you friends." See, servants don't know the heart of their masters, they just obey. And Jesus says, "I've always wanted more for you." Not just servants who obey, but people that I share my life with, my joys, my thoughts, my pain. I want us to fellowship. I want us to walk together. So Jesus lets us in, and then he never lets us down. Verse 16 says, "You did not choose me, I chose you." And what does that mean? Jesus is not proclaiming here, hey dudes, I'm a Calvinist. That wasn't the point of it. When Jesus said, you did not choose me, but I chose you, here's what he's saying. Jesus did not choose his friendships based on your righteousness. He didn't choose you because you were popular or rich or cool or had something to offer. It's not like the Disney movies who characters are dirty on the outside, but when you get deep, there's an inner beauty. No, he looked on the inside and he saw even more dirt and sin. Jesus lets you in and he says, "Come." How do you come? By repentance. He never lets you down. He actually went to hell for you and conquered it. In the garden, Adam and Eve were walking with God. Walking is always a metaphor for friendship in the Old Testament. So there was friendship. We had that. Then they sinned, and that broke the friendship with God. When they sinned, we sinned. It's not like just because they're sinners, we're sinners. No. When they sinned, we sinned. In that moment, we sinned. And here's what Jesus Christ does. Jesus Christ lost his friendship with God so that we could have friendship with God. That is the cross. In the Old Testament, Moses and Abraham were called friends of God, but now through Jesus Christ, every one of the redeemed are called friends of God. Jesus is a saving friend. He's a substitute friend. He's a kingly friend. He is the friend your heart desires.